Welcome back. My name is Erica, and in this video we are going to tackle some sewing projects. So on the agenda for today's video, we are going to tackle 3 sewing projects. The first is I am sewing some linen bread bags that I want to put in my Etsy shop, and I've been slowly working on them. There's several that I'm doing at one time. So the goal for this is to, at the very least, hem the tops of the bags and at least cut the ties out. If I can get more done, that would be great, but we'll see. And then the second project is going to be a cushion for my desk chair. I have needed this desperately for a long time. The chair is comfortable, but if you sit in it for a long time, it's not so comfortable. So I want to tackle that. And then lastly, I would like to make some throw pillows or decorative pillows for my wooden bench that I have in my living room. I have a lot of stuffing, a lot of polyfill. If you watched my sofa pad video, you know what I'm talking about. I ordered way too much. So I'm trying to think of different projects that I can do to utilize that. And so I thought some decorative pillows would be a great project. So we're gonna tackle that. And yeah, so let's get into the video. Let me show you how I go about making all of these fun little projects. Project number 1 is going to be my linen bread bags. Now, I do have a full tutorial of this up on my blog as well as YouTube, so I'll link it here in the cards if you want to check out how to make your own linen bread bags. But for the sake of this video, I'm just going to share a little bit of the progress that I'm making. Like I said, plan on putting these on Etsy, in my Etsy shop, and handmade items take a long time to make, especially when you're making multiples of the same thing. And my schedule is pretty busy as it is, so I'm just working on these as I see fit. My goal is to put them up probably by the fall so that they're ready for Christmas and that time of year. But I thought I'd just share a little bit of this process and my progress just because it was one of the few items that I had on my sewing to-do list. So it's the next day and it is a Sunday. It's raining out, it's dark and dreary. That's okay, I actually like these kind of days. So last night I sewed all of the bags. I didn't get to the ties. I didn't screw anything up, but I needed to cut more fabric for the ties. So I did that. I sewed all of the bags. I do have to go back and fix 2 of them, and just one side of them needs to be redone. So I don't want to do that project anymore. So I'm going to move on to the cushion for this desk chair. I've never made a cushion like that, but in my head I think it's going to be pretty easy. We'll see how that goes. But I want to work on that, and I'll walk you through all the steps that I'm going to take to do that. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, I do want to say that I have a written blog post with the instructions that I can link down below if you'd like to see things written out. But I'll just go through this pretty quickly. It's a fairly easy project. The first thing I'm doing is taking a foam mattress topper that I had from a previous project, and I'm just laying it on the seat of the chair and basically making a template. So this part doesn't have to be perfect, But what I'm doing is just taking my scissors and kind of feeling where the chair is and cutting appropriately. It might take a little bit of time to just make sure everything fits depending on what your chair looks like. But yeah, I just kind of butted up the side of my scissors to the edge of my chair, and I was able to get a pretty accurate template. And we're going to use that to cut out our fabric later on. So now moving on to cutting out our fabric, I'm laying my template on a folded piece of fabric. So there's two layers because we want a top piece and a bottom piece. And really what we're doing is we are going to create the seam allowance that's going to go all the way around it. So I'm just laying it on my fabric so I don't use more than I need. And you can just take a tape measure or one of these sewing gauges, and we are going to measure out an inch. So we want to have an inch all the way around so that way we can have room for stuffing. So if you're new to sewing and you're not quite sure what I'm talking about, you will have a seam allowance. So when you put the fabric onto your sewing machine, it is going to sew in half an inch. And I could have just left it at a half inch, but I wanted to make sure there was room to add the polyfill. So that's why I'm doing an inch all the way around, and I just used my tailor's chalk and drew little dashes around a 1 inch from the edge of that foam mattress topper, and then I just connected all the dots and I can cut everything out. Now I do like to pin the fabric together. It makes it easier so it's not sliding around, and that way you have a very uniform piece of fabric, or two pieces of fabric really. You want them to be exactly the same. So now I need to figure out how long I want the ties. And on this chair, hold on. Okay, so on this chair, I can't tie them up here because there's a gap. So I think I'm gonna tie the cushion on right here. So I want to determine how long I need these to be. And I'll also have to figure out where to attach them. I guess it would be on the side and on the back here. So I think just the easiest way to just at least get a figure of how long I might want them to be, because I'm gonna want to tie them in a knot or in a bow probably. Let's test this out. I'm going to cut a piece of string. Let's see if that would be long enough. Attach there minus like half an inch. Should be plenty. So I think I'm going to cut 4 pieces that are 10 inches long for the ties of here. So now I just need to figure out how wide I want them to be. Sorry, I'm looking over here. The camera's over here, sorry. I have my thing switched. Anyway, yeah. So let me just think about it for a second and then we'll get the ties cut. So for my chair, I'm cutting my ties 2 inches wide by 10 inches long, and I'm going to cut a total of 4. So basically we're going to attach them, one on one side of that wooden piece we're going to tie it to, one on the other, and then repeat it for the other side of the chair. Now to make the ties look a little bit better, we are going to fold them a bunch. So first you're going to fold one of the long sides up a half inch all the way down the length. Then you'll turn it over and fold the other side basically to meet up with the edge of that other folded side. So you're basically making a skinnier rectangle, and I just like to use my iron to press everything down. And then we're going to fold that in half one more time and pin it. and that is one of your ties. They're really, really simple to do, and then we'll take it to the sewing machine and sew it. To sew the ties, I just line the folded edge of the tie up with the right side of the presser foot, and I'm just sewing that open edge closed. And I'm going to repeat that for all 4 of my ties. Now it's time to assemble our cushion. And what I did is I just folded my main seat cushion, the portion of that fabric, I folded it in half, and I'm just making it even on both sides. It wasn't quite the same, so I just wanted to make it more uniform, so I'm going ahead and taking the time to do that. Now we're going to pin the ties in place, and this might be the trickiest part, but it's really not that hard. I'm just lining the very short edge up with the edge of the fabric, and then I'm making sure that it is in to the left about 1/4 of an inch, and that's because I want to make sure that when I'm sewing that I'm catching that portion basically of the tie. So I'm going to pin all 4 of my ties like that in between my 2 pieces of fabric. And when you're sewing, you want to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but you also want to make sure that you're only sewing the short edge of the ties. You don't want to have the the length of the tie in the way, because then you're going to basically sew your tie, if that makes sense. So just be extra careful when you get to the ties and only sew the very end. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, so we're gonna sew mostly all the way around, but I am going to leave a good part of the bottom open because we're going to be putting our mattress topper in there as well as some polyfill. So I just take the time to trim the edges of the fabric, leaving about 1/4 of an inch away from the seam. And then we're going to turn it right side out and kind of press the corners. I like to use my crochet hook for that. It just helps to make the seams look really nice. But you can see here, the ties are there and it looks so nice. And now we are going to stuff it. This might take a little bit of time to really get it how you want, but you're going to have to kind of fold your foam in there and get it situated so that it's all nice and neat and flat. And the way we sewed it, we have a little bit of extra room, but this, the foam should fit in there pretty snug with a little bit of extra wiggle room. Then we're going to move on to stuffing it. And as I said, I have so much of this, so I'm finding all the projects to do. But you basically just want to take, handfuls at a time and really shove them into the corners. And you can kind of play around with how fluffy you want this to be. But I wanted it fairly fluffy. So I just made sure that I was pushing it into the corners and kind of, flattening and pulling it so there weren't a lot of lumps and bumps. So play around with how you want this to look. It's really a personal preference. Now we need to sew that opening shut, and I like to hand sew this. It is a little bit time consuming, but not too bad. I like to first start by pinning that seam closed, and then we are going to do what's called a ladder stitch. Now, I had never used this stitch before, but I looked it up how to make it look better when you're closing it with hand stitching. I'll leave a link for the tutorial that I found. It was really helpful, but it makes a really clean looking seam with hand sewing. Now I'm just putting on my cushion, and I love how it looks, but I wanted to add a couple more details. So you could stop here and you would have a lovely seat cushion. I'm sitting on my cushion right now. It is extremely comfortable, but I wanted it to look a little bit more polished. Now, again, I keep referencing that sofa pad video, but this is very similar to that. And I added tufts. I think that's what they're called. I can't find any other information. So if you know what these are actually called, if they're not tufts, let me know down in the comments. But I wanted to add a couple of tufts. So what I'm doing is I measured the width and I measured the length of this cushion. divided that by 4. I divided each number by 4, and that told me basically where I needed to place some dots. So wherever those 2 points intersect, that is where I added a dot. And because this is striped, I can kind of make sure that they're really lined up just by going down the stripe. If your fabric isn't striped, you won't be able to do that. But as long as your measurements are accurate, they will be nice and lined. But I'm just using a Sharpie to create a little dot, and then we're going to use some yarn thread. You could use, I don't know, whatever you've got on hand. It needs to be a little bit thicker. You don't want to use just regular thread. It does need to have some bulk to it. But I string it on one of my yarn needles, push it down through the top, all the way through the bottom, and then back up through the bottom, through that mark that we made. And then I'm going to take my needle to the right about 1/4 of an inch and take it back down through all of the layers and out the bottom. And then all you do is you simply tie a knot and pull it as tight as you can get it, and then tie 2 more knots, cut off the excess, and you've made your little tuft. Now you can use this technique with buttons. I did buy some buttons that I thought I would use for my other project, and then I got to thinking it might not be the most comfortable with the buttons that I got. But if you want to add buttons, go ahead. You would use a very similar technique to this. But I just think that it makes it look a little bit more polished and a little bit prettier. But you could certainly leave it as it was if you don't want to take this extra step. So we are on to project number 3, and it is already late in the day. It's about 3:30, but I think I can knock this out today and still make supper and do all the things that I've got to do. So I want, as I said, some pillows for my wooden bench that I have in my living room. And I'm kind of debating on what I want to do. I thought originally I would match whatever I put on the bench to my sofa pad, but I don't know that I want to do that. And that would be the material I used for our chair cushion, this really pretty seersucker. I don't know if it's navy blue or black stripe. I think it's really pretty. I'm not sure if I want to use that or not. And then I had bought this, it's kind of like a denim color. I was gonna make an apron out of it, and if I don't use it for this project, I definitely am going to do that. That's another option. And then I also thrifted this curtain. It's just a white curtain. I got it for just a few dollars. And I was thinking I would use it, you know, over a window, but I think with the size of our windows, we need 2 panels, and I don't have a matching panel to this. So I think I'm gonna use it for a project. So what I'm gonna do is take these out to the bench and just see what I want. I've been thinking about this for a few days and I'm still not sure what I want to do. So let's go out to the bench and figure out what colors we want to use. Okay, so I think I decided what I want to do. I'm going to use this curtain fabric to make a larger square pillow. And then I'm going to use this seersucker fabric to make kind of a longer rectangular pillow. I think that'll be pretty, and this will be more of the statement. On my couch, I have 2 white pillows. They're like more of like an off-white color. This is, it's hard to tell in the lighting, but it's whiter than those pillows, but I think that's gonna look really nice. These shouldn't take long at all to do, so let me show you how to make them. So pillows are really easy to make. First, you just need to determine what size you want your pillow. So I determined that I wanted the white one to be 16 by 16. Now in hindsight, I think I should have made it bigger, but it's okay. I wanted it to be 16 by 16. So you also want to account for your seam allowance. So you want to be measuring and cutting out a piece of fabric that is 17 by 17 inches. So whatever your measurement is, add 1 inch to both the length and the width, and you will have your seam allowance. So all I'm doing is cutting out a square piece of fabric. Now I did fold it, so I've got both of them and I have them pinned together so we get the exact same size for both sides of the pillow. But I'm cutting out 17 by 17, 2 pieces of fabric. And then for my other one, I wanted it to be a rectangle, as I said. I wanted it to be 18 inches long by 10 inches wide. So I cut it 19 inches long by 11 inches wide. As I said before, I'm sewing with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and for both pillows, we are going to sew 3 sides and part of another, leaving about a 4 or 5 inch space so that we can stuff our pillows. I trimmed the edges of both of the pillowcases and then I'm turning them right side out, again using the crochet hook to make sure that the corners are pushed out really well and that the seams are also pushed out. And then it'll be time to stuff. I'm so excited I get to use some of this. Lastly, we are going to sew the openings for both pillows using the ladder stitch. So much for watching this video. I hope that I inspired you to tackle some of those projects that you might be putting off. Summer is a great time, especially if it's really hot where you live. Just spending some time in the cool air and tackling some of those projects is a fun way to spend an afternoon or a weekend if you've got nothing going on. But again, thank you so much for being here. If you are new to sewing or you want to get into sewing, stay tuned to the next video because I will be going over how I taught myself how to sew, some of the essentials that you might need to get started sewing. So I'm really looking forward to that. So stay tuned to the next video. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and the bell notification. It'll notify you every time I upload a new video. But have a great day and I'll see you next time.